Because you are joining our conversation now, I'm going to start with you, Godfrey. What is your position as a federation of trade unions representing workers? We've been chatting just before you joined our conversation about the divide between trying to create jobs and implementing macroeconomic policy in the interest of workers, which stands seemingly opposed to the interests of the private sector and foreign investors and increased growth there. How do we balance the two?
Thank you very much. Let me also greet your listeners out there. Firstly, let me indicate that as FEDUSA, we just worried that some of the policies that have been there have been, repeatedly being outlined as policies that would favor growth in the country. However, our understanding is that, it's like you just cosmetically indicate that they're there to create jobs. However, the jobs that you want to see are not actually coming forth. We just had our meeting around March. We were worried about these kind of issues. And one of the things that we looked at was the fact that if you look, for an example, in your ESCOM, this question that is coming that they're going to dismantle ESCOM, we do not necessarily support it. Because you remember that some time ago when the new democratic government came into the picture, there was also unbundling of Transnet into different spheres. And what would you see? Terrible things that had come out. People have been losing jobs. So our view is that, the question of unbundling does not necessarily help the country. And our view is that perhaps our government should look at the policies that are there so that other than just talking, we must be seeing those policies implemented and practically coming out with the required jobs that we're looking at.
So what specifically would you see, if you're saying that the unbundling of ESCOM is possibly going to have a detrimental effect and not the kind of growth stimulus that we want, what would you see happen to ESCOM instead? Because we cannot avoid the fact or negate the fact that there is a huge problem with increasing debt. SOEs are a huge problem, and that problem isn't going away, as you say, under the current policies.
Look, our understanding is that these challenges that are there are man-made challenges. Because remember the question of corruption, it's something that is man-made. And therefore, those SOEs suffered a lot due to the question of corruption. Our view is that they must just get the right leadership in place so that they begin to make sure that they consistently apply policies so that they are able to run those
Can corruption logically be the only problem with SOEs?
Look,
I want to jump to you here.
Look, like I said, it might not necessarily be corruption alone. But the other challenge that we're facing there is the question of implementing the policies themselves. If you don't have ethical leaders in leadership position, what do you expect? And the other thing is, we have suffered the question of cadre deployment, that some of the people were not equal to the job. And that's why we're saying those are the kind of things that make that entity not to be able to drive its mission objectively. We must not fool each other, because you'll remember that in the past, before these things happened, the people were there, ran those institutions efficiently and profitably.
Okay. I'm going to bring in the Parliamentary Officer for COSATU from our Cape Town studios here. Mr. Matthew Parks, COSATU has vowed in the past to hold President Ramaphosa to account on the issue of implementation of a new policy, specifically with regard to SOEs. What do you want to see happening in the future, and how do we not necessarily talk about changing policies? As we've heard, we expect policy to stay relatively the same. How do we expect to hold the President to account in the coming months to make sure that SOEs are run more efficiently?
Yes, look, I just want to say one thing. The comment by the President of FEDUSA, Comrade Godfrey, was a very important comment. We've got all the policies, all the resources in the state. It's a question of implementing it. For COSATU, we supported the President, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, but we're also very clear with him and with his team. There is no time for a honeymoon. There will be no friendship, no favors. We expect them to deliver. We don't have time for words, for pontification, for slogans. We're in a crisis. Government needs to step up to the plate and to deliver. We are engaging with the President and with his team of economic ministers. We are confident that it's a strong team led by ministers like Ibrahim Patel, who are seized with the crisis and who come with plans. We are engaging them also in the preparations for the State of the Nation address to have a clear way forward, both in the short, the medium and the long terms, for the State of the Nation address in the next 2 weeks. But look, we need to see real actions. The Presidential Job Summit last year had a clear plan, clear targets, clear timeframes. It's now for government and for business to implement it. As COSATU, we're putting pressure on them to do exactly that. And we are hopeful that there are positive green shoots coming out. We've seen successful interventions by government in the auto manufacturing, in the clothing industries, in the sugar industries coming now, where we're starting to halt the job losses and even to create new jobs. There are other new economic sectors where we can do the same, in agriculture, in water, in energy, in conservation, tourism, and so on. With regards to the state-owned enterprises, our plan, demands are very clear. One, there cannot be job losses. Workers cannot be punished for the looting, for the mismanagement. If there's a need to redeploy workers from one part of ESCOM to another part of ESCOM, we can engage around that. But we cannot solve unemployment by retrenching workers. The President has given us the commitment that the workers will not be retrenched. We've made proposals around how we can stabilize ESCOM, dealing with the looting and the mismanagement, but also, in fact, how we can grow ESCOM in the energy industry by investing in electric cars, in renewable energy, in exports to the continent. But this requires stable tariffs, affordable tariffs for industry and for consumers. We are hopeful that we have a serious leadership now in government. What we need to see now, also equally, is business coming to the party. Government has given many incentives and tax benefits to business. They need now to show the patriotism by contributing it. With regards to SAFU, we're happy to meet with SAFU anytime. If SAFU has got a reasonable plan, we're happy to engage with them. But in the meantime, as COSATU, we have to engage with the realities of today and not just slogans. We have to engage with government and with business to find real solutions to the crisis facing workers on a daily basis.
I want to come back to our representative from SAFTU, Mr. Mametlwe Sebe. You were talking earlier about rolling mass actions from workers to address the issue of job cuts and lack of increased wages in line with inflation increases. How do you think that's going to impact the economy positively?
Can I just respond to this question that the problem in the state it's just an issue of corruption? I mean, COSATU says that we must have, as part of our solution, reasonable tariffs for industry. But that is exactly the main problem. Because if you look at, for instance, ESCOM, take an example, of all these deals that they have with, the so-called intensive energy users. The biggest consumer of ESCOM electricity supply is BHP Billiton, which consume up to 10% of ESCOM, but yet it only contributes, less than 1% of income of ESCOM's income. That is a fundamental part of the problem, that the state-owned entities under capitalism are being used to subsidize profits of the capitalist class and not to render services much needed by the working class communities and the poor. And I think that's the issue that we need to be able to discuss. And it's the same problem that I think also, Margaret Foundation does not reckon with. That the reason we're in this crisis is because business is not investing. And business is not investing because, of government spending a little bit more on education, a little bit more on housing and all the things and so on. It's because of the crisis of profitability. People go into business not because they want to produce goods and services, but because they can make more money. And because of the poverty, owing to retrenchment, mass layoffs, and increasing poverty of the working class and the poor in this country in the past 10 years, but also the slowing down of the economy internationally, it means that there is no way out of exporting, the production, but also absorbing it domestically. That is a fundamental problem that is at the core of what we call the chronic crisis of South African capitalism. We believe the only alternative is a mass movement of the working class to fight back. And that's the reason that we continue to challenge comrades in COSATU to say, the present in this coming nation, the State of the Nation address, all that we expect is a very brutal and working class program to roll out the manifesto which has been campaigned for by the credit rating agencies that have been saying we need restructuring post the elections. And that would be at the expense of the workers. The workers must fight back. And that is the reason that we are inviting, COSATU on a program of fight back. We believe the only solution is to take into public ownership under a democratic control and management of the industry by the working class people to plan the economy to meet the needs for unemployment, for jobs, for housing, for education. There is so much to be done in this country. Yet you have about 10 million people that are unemployed, that are sitting idle, that are suffering from poverty owing to lack of income. All of that can be solved by restructuring the economy on the basis of nationalization of the key sectors of the economy under a democratic control and management of the workers, and that is our socialist alternative to this crisis.
Right. Last comments from each of you to wrap up the discussion.
So we sort of need a rethink of how we view these things. For example, our friend here is complaining about cronyism, and I agree with him, it's a big problem having cronyism, having crony deals, but that is enabled exactly by having a public-owned company such as Eskom, which have monopolies. If you had more of a scenario where you had competition among different electricity providers, they wouldn't have cronyism, because as soon as a deal that was not suitable for a company was signed with, let's say BHP Billiton, then that company will start losing money in the market as consumers chose a different electricity provider. That is what the Free Market Foundation is calling for. And in the case of, in terms of capital itself, capital is also suffering. There is gross capital formation has declined for the past 5 quarters. This quarter declined by 4.5%. It means that there is simply no profit to be made in South Africa right now under the policies that we have, because we are not allowing everyone the maximum freedom to interact in the markets and trade with each other. If I as a poor person look for the cheapest price, whether for electricity, for whatever, I should be able to find different competitors who will try to woo me on the basis of price or quality or whatever, and then I should be able to make that choice. And that is exactly the opposite of what my friend, the proposal that he's making will lead to. It will lead to a worse situation for poor people, as we have seen in countries like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and so on and so on.
Right, let's get a last comment from Matthew Parks from COSATU from our Cape Town studio. Your summation.
Sure. Look, the economic report is a wake-up call for all of us. We cannot afford for it to continue. We can't afford to see more workers lose their jobs or go to recession. There is a clear jobs plan that was adopted at the Jobs Summit last year. As COSATU, we're going to continue to engage with the President, with his economic ministers, to deliver on that plan, to put pressure on business to come to the party and honour its commitments. Workers simply can't afford for us to engage in slogans. We actually need to have a real plan and to move on it.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for all your contributions. That has been Story of the Week. I'll be back with more news at the top of the hour.